Hello, welcome back to Suburban Hunt 365. I am DJ. We are back in the reload room again today. And today's video, we're going to be doing something that I haven't done in a little while, and that is we're going to be doing a step-by-step breakdown. Now, for those of you that saw last week's video, you saw me do a restoration on this guy right here. This is my cousin's Iver Johnson 12 gauge with a just crazy long goose barrel. But it was a lot of fun. It was in a house fire, for those of you that hadn't seen that video, and it was in pretty rough shape. So if you haven't seen that video, by all means follow the link above. But now that we've got this thing all prettied up and back to the way it needs to be, we're gonna go ahead and do a full breakdown. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So basically, when you're going to start with these, the forearm. This forearm, as you can tell, does not have any type of screw along the edge here. Some of these single shots will. This one does not. So that means that it's got a retention on the inside of this. Basically, just brace it on your knee, grab it by the barrel, and from the top, pull. So you can see that there is a clip. Maybe black wasn't the perfect one to wear, but you have this clip here that fits inside this, like such. So you'll just pull from the top and it'll come up. It may take, if it hasn't happened in a while, it may take a little bit of force, but just know that that's kind of normal. So you pull the forearm there. From there, you got your brake barrel in the back. Here, you're gonna push it, breaks the barrel, and the barrel comes off like such. So now this is ready to field strip. I love these old single shots because they are just that easy. Just forearm comes off, whether it's with a screw or not a screw, you break it and you're ready to go. So from inside here, you can see you get your firing pin. You got a little bit of the housing down there. But for using purposes, you can definitely break it down and clean it that easy, clean the barrel out. A little bit of residue here that you would clean off and you'd be back to what you need to do. But as I mentioned, we are going to go ahead and break this down. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and remove this buttstock here. There are two Phillips head screws, or in this case flathead, excuse me, screws, one on top, one on bottom. So we're going to go ahead and go to the bench and let's get these removed. All right guys, as I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and take these screws out real quick. All right, and underneath here is another flathead screw. If I can get this to show up. This screw is the bolt that goes through the buttstock and actually attaches the receiver to the buttstock. So let's go ahead and let's remove that. That is also another flathead. Now, if you guys haven't taken one of these apart or haven't taken the gun apart in a while, this is the part that could be a little bit stiff. Right now I'm just using a regular gunsmithing screwdriver. If you need to, you may have to break out the big stick and break it loose, but be very careful when you're doing that, mainly because if the stock is in bad condition, you can damage the stock in the process of trying to take that apart. All right, once you're out there, basically all you have to do then is grab a hold firmly and pull on the buttstock, and there's that. So your buttstock is basically just 3 screws. Now we can go ahead and I'm going to put this in here for safekeeping. Same with these. And now we're going to move to the receiver. Okay, so as we see, you have your receiver here. So your receiver, you have your frame, you have your hammer, which in this case is cocked back now. You have your top lever, you have your trigger guard, and then your pins here, you have 3 pins and a screw from this side. You have your trigger pin here on the bottom. You have this middle pin is your hammer pin, and this top one is your locking pin, your locking bolt pin, which is basically this piece right here on the inside that when you shut your barrel, it locks that in place. It's also what moves when you move your top lever. It's kind of hard to show, but that's what moves. Underneath here, you have your locking bolt spring, which is screwed down to the frame on that side. Back here in the back, you have a trigger spring here on the bottom. If I can get this light to act right here. On the bottom there, you can see that piece of metal there on the bottom with the screw in it. That is going to be your trigger spring, and then you have your hammer spring back here in the back. All right, so basically what we're going to start off with in disassemble is going to go ahead and get our trigger guard out of the way, which is our, let's see, this one's too wide. A flathead screwdriver will take it out. There is only one screw on this. The other side is just kind of hooked to the frame from the other side. So there's one screw here, and then this kind of just comes out like such. You can see the little notch right there that goes in. So when you go put this back in, it notches in and then hinges down. So you just hinge up and then kind of pry that loose. That takes that loose there. All right, so now that we have the trigger guard out of the way, we are going to go ahead and remove the actual trigger itself, which is by removing this pin. Now I do have this in a cocked position, so I'm going to pull that back and decock this. If you were to take this out, the second that you push that pin out and knock this trigger out of the way, the hammer would drop and wherever your fingers are or where your fingers are. So if your hammer is back, you want to release the pressure and put it down. So grabbing your punch, let's grab a block here. Let's go ahead and knock out our firing pin. Make sure we got ourselves squared away here. All right. So we got our trigger pin out of the way. And as you saw, this kind of moved around. So as soon as I pull this punch out, it's going to push the trigger up and out. So our trigger's out of the way with our trigger pin sitting right there, nice and pretty. Right? So now, a little dust on there. Now what we can do is we can go ahead and take out the pin for our hammer. Now the hammer right now has all the pressure of this spring on the back. You can, if you wanted to, hammer this out and push it down. But what it's going to do is it's going to cause undue stress on this piece here that's actually holding this spring in. Because the only thing holding it in is a pin back here in the back. So I can get closer here. So you got a pin that's going through this rod here, right? So if you push this down, out through the bottom, it's just going to put undue stress on this, and it could damage something. It's probably not going to, but it could. So what I choose to do is to go ahead and take the pin, the hammer pin, and push it through. Then it'll push the hammer itself will push forward, taking the tension off of this spring, and at that point you can literally just knock that out with no problem. We shouldn't even need our hammer at that point. So let's go ahead and knock out our hammer pin. Make sure we get that all the way out. There we go. Now you actually saw that one perfectly. I'm actually glad that happened. Like I said, as soon as you get this loose, because I used a smaller punch to finish it out, it was a little bit longer, the hammer went forward, moving it forward, which took the tension off of the spring, and then it literally just fell out of the frame. Because as you can see, this guy here, there's no need to take this apart unless there's damage here or something, which if you're going to do that, you want to compress this and then knock that pin out of the back, and then you could get this down and dirty. But there was no need for me to do this. This was in good condition when I got the gun, despite the fact that it needed to be restored because of the rust on the outside, but this is exactly how it came, so there was no need for me to mess with it. So we got that out of the way. That one pin, it also pushes our hammer. Our hammer comes out. And let's get the pin out of the way. So there is our hammer pin. Fits in beautifully like that. So now what we have is the locking bolt here. So remember again, this piece down here is what a locking bolt. Okay, so with these Iver Johnson single shots, with this top lever here, if you have to take this all the way out, everything I've seen, you pretty much have to drill this out and then put you another screw, and you got to tap and die it with putting another screw on here. When I got this from my cousin, it had some damage on there, but as you can tell, I was able to clean off that rust and re-blue that without ever having to take that off. Some guys may argue that that's necessary to take that off, but I didn't want to mess this up and devalue it, but it still has the original on there. So rather than do all that, I just left it alone. Now, how did I take out this locking pin? Because inside here, there's a rod, and I'm going to do my dangest if I can. probably gonna have to move. Let's see, let me grab my flashlight here, my trusty flashlight. If you can see down inside there, right there, you see that rod? That rod connects to the top. So our top piece is right there with that rod. That rod goes down inside there and connects to the back side of this lock right here. Okay, so on this left side over here is where that rod comes in and connects to the bottom. Okay, so now before we can take this pin out, on the side here, you can see that spring. So this guy, if I can grab something to point with here. So this guy down here, right? That guy is your locking bolt spring, or your locking spring here, right? So in order to get this out, we've got to remove the pressure here, because if you take this pin out, you're stuck. Because again, you still have the rod that's connected to your top lever here, right? So if you don't take that out, you're just right where you left off. It's just gonna be stuck there. So we want to take a flathead screwdriver. Let's go ahead and get in there and remove that. Now remember, this is under tension. So once that last spring comes in, you want to put a little bit of downward force on there to make sure, see, just like that. It's kind of hard, my fingers in the way, but it pops loose. So you got all that upward pressure on this. So if you're not careful, you could lose it. So you want to make sure you put enough pressure on there to make sure that screw doesn't go anywhere. So anyway, you have your screw here, right? So this is it from the side. So you have this spring pushing up on your lock down here. Let's see if we can get them both in the picture here. So your lock, so this spring is pushing up. So if I was to push that pin out, I've still got the pressure pushing up, and I've still got that rod that I showed you a second ago still stuck in there. Now you see I can still move it now. I can move this a lot easier now the tension's out of the way. But that's how that works, because I've still got that rod in there. So let's go ahead, and now that we've got the tension off that spring, let's go ahead and remove that pin. A little bit longer one, knock that out. There we go. All right, so we got our pin on this back side here. We're going to go ahead and remove that. And you can kind of see now, if you look down in there, this fell back in there. Okay, so now we got this falling back in there. Now the rod, as I mentioned before, let me grab my handy dandy flashlight here. Right? All right, there we go. So you got your rod in there that goes to the actual bolt itself. Well, this rod only goes in, it goes in and cuts to the right. So you basically have the rod doing this, going into that. So basically what you can do is you can stick your screwdriver down in here and put it between the rod itself and your lock and pry it to the right, and it'll pop off. Okay, sorry about that. That was a little bit more complicated. So with that rod going to the right there, as I'm trying to pry this to the right, I had to be able to push that front, because what happened is the locking pin, well, now that I got that out, I can show you. So you have your lock here, right? That's what this guy is. So your pin went down here, or the pin goes up here, which is like this, right? So your pin is up here, and then that bar comes down and goes into the right side of, or to the left side of this, goes across. So what I was having to do was pry this to the right while also moving that rod to the left to get that to slip off of there. So that gives me that locking pin. So what we have now in here left is the trigger spring and the firing pin. Well, the firing pin is quick and easy. It is just a flathead screwdriver that you just take this screw out. Now with this screw here, with the firing pin in the back, you'll notice, as a matter of fact, let me go ahead and get that out real quick. So just bring this out. The firing pin is under spring tension, but it's not really enough to throw it anywhere. So you can take that screw out, no problem. There is your firing pin screw. We're gonna move that to the side, and then your firing pin will just drop out. And this time the spring came with it, which was nice. Before I had to get in there and clean that pocket out because it was stuck in there pretty good. Okay, so basically what you have to look for in your firing pin is the fact that you have this little notch on there, right? So you got this notch on there. This notch has got to be facing down. So when you go to put this back inside here, you want it facing downward like this, okay? So notch down in, because you can see if you take, say we take our Allen wrench, if you can see down in there, again, let me get my hand in the flashlight, so you can see down in there, the Allen key is at the bottom of that pocket. So you want to make sure that that goes into goes down towards the bottom. Okay. All right. So that is our receiver. Like I said, if you wanted to completely break it down, you would need to drill this out and get your top lever off of there. The only thing I did misspeak is our trigger spring, which use that one. Our trigger spring is simply a flathead screw, and be careful not to really mar this up as you're doing this, because it's kind of right underneath the frame here. So there's the screw there. So you can't really come at it directly from the top. You got a slight angle. So be careful when you're taking that off there and make sure you don't strip it. When this thing was pretty rusted, I did have to hit it with some PB Blaster and really get that to break loose, let it kind of eat into it to get that loose. And then basically your spring comes out like such. Now with this one, you do want to make sure that you realize that the spring is going down towards the trigger, because what happens in this case is your trigger, if I can get this pin off of here, your trigger is going to be sitting like this in your gun, and this spring provides tension on the back of this. So if I can see some little bit of contrast there. So it's sitting like this. So just keep in mind when you go to put that back together, that's how that does. And then keep these screws together to make sure that the right screws are going in the right spot. So that is it for what we're going to do for the receiver itself. Like I said, the only thing we didn't take apart was the top lever, and we're not doing that because I don't want to damage the gun unnecessarily. Okay, so putting this back together goes somewhat in an exact reverse. You can kind of do a little bit here or there just to kind of do stuff, but in the sake of getting parts out of the way first, I'm gonna go ahead and throw in our firing pin just to get parts and springs off the table. So you got your firing pin, you got your firing pin spring, right? Again, the notch is going down towards the frame. Gonna put that in there like such, making sure it's down near the frame. Our firing pin screw will then go into this notch here. So notice that I'm gonna get this started with my fingers, right? But with the firing pin spring pushing back, it's gonna get in the way of the screw. So you're gonna wanna take your fingers and push in the firing pin as you screw this down. If I can get my fat hand out of the way. All right. So if you're in this spot here where the screw is about flush with the frame and you hit resistance, that's because you're setting on top of the firing pin. Okay, push the firing pin in a little bit further and then go ahead and screw this down. This pin should be recessed down inside there. Okay, so you get that good, make sure you can still move the firing pin back and forth. You still want it to operate, right? So it's working good there. But you also want to make sure that's retaining the firing pin. We don't want to lose that firing pin. That would be very bad. Okay, from here we're going to go ahead and we're going to put the lock back in. All right, our locking bolt back in. Now this is also tricky because of the fact that we've got this connected to the bar still, right? So the bar's down inside there. So what we have to do now is get it inside there and then get the rod back into this bottom hole here, which is not terribly hard. So you get this in here. I'm gonna see if I can catch this on camera best I can. So you get that inside there and then you just push it back. Okay, you can see the rod, if I can get my leg here. Now you can see that that's in there. So you got the lock needs to go to the right if you're facing with the gun, but go away from me, and then the connector needs to come and go inside there. So we're gonna kind of do that the best you can. So again, you want to get your screwdrivers, get what you need, push that rod over, and then line that up. If you need to move your top lever to kind of give you some space or help line that up, by all means, do it. But you want to line that hole up, and right there. So now our hole's lined up. So now we're going to move this, slide this over onto the connector. Okay. So we've got that connected inside there. It's going to be kind of hard to show you, but it is connected inside there where that rod is inside that bottom. So now that we've got that, we're going to be looking down in through our hole here where we got our pin lined up. So again, if you need to move your top lever to kind of get it in place, that's more than fine. But kind of get it in place, lift it up if you have to. But what we're wanting to do is that back hole that you saw earlier, we're trying to line that up. If I can get the light over here. You're trying to line that up with the hole. This is not doing well. I'm gonna need to move a light up. All right, sorry guys, I'm back. Sorry about that. We just kept fighting with this light. I just wanted to put a light up here on top. So you have the, there we go. So that's the back side. That back here is the back side of that lock. And what we want to do is we want to line that up with this top hole for your pin. So grabbing the pin for our lock. Now, if you get these mixed up, guys, they are 3 different sizes, okay? You have a large hole, medium-sized hole, and then the smallest one down in the bottom. So if I was to grab the trigger pin and try to put that in there, it's obviously way too small for that. All right, so just if you're not sure, put it up against it. Make sure it's the right one. So I'm going to get this started on this side. First, I'm going to clean that off. My goodness. Get that started here on one side, and then get that back up to where it needs to be to line up on the other side. There we go. All right, so it's going to be kind of hard to see, but your inside here, your lock just does fit. There's not a lot of excess room in between there. You can see the frame kind of comes in. That just fell, but I want to get that in between the frame and ready for that pin. So we're going to get that up, holding it with my finger down here at the bottom, lining that up, and send it home. I'm going to drive that pin in close. I'm not sending it home with the hammer. We will grab a punch and send it home, making sure we don't mar the finish that we just did with our restoration. All right, guys, so now that we got the locking bolt in place and the firing pin in place, what we're going to do is we're going to start working on the inside. So basically what I want to show you here is you have your hammer, your spring, your trigger, and your trigger spring all sitting inside the gun like that. Okay, so if you're wondering how that works, your trigger, your spring, or excuse me, your hammer, your spring, your trigger, and then trigger spring there. This spring goes against your bolt catch over here, or your locking bolt over there. So what we can do is you could try to put all this into the frame, but then you're going to have a nightmare of a time getting this spring in here. So while everything's out of the way on the frame, let's go ahead and grab your trigger spring, and let's go ahead and line that up and get that back in there. So when you're looking on your frame here, if you're not sure, on the bottom here you can see where this hole on this side, if I can get it to focus, is the back side of a screw, and this side has a little bit of a taper on the inside. Okay, that means that that's the hole that the screw is going to go into for your spring, where this one is for your trigger guard. So if you flip this over, you can see that that has a little bit of taper to it. This does not. So that would be the back of the screw. This is going to be the front of the screw. The other thing you can do is you can actually line that up. If I try to line the screw up, you can see that it doesn't get to the trigger. When you move it to the forward, it does then. So we want it to be in that front of the trigger. So we're going to line that up like so. And again, the same way you took it off, put it back on, being very careful not to strip that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start this with my fingers just to get it going. Once you get it in place here. All right, and then I'm going to use the screwdriver to go ahead and finish getting it home. All right, so we do want that tight, but like I mentioned before, putting this in there would have been a nightmare trying to put that in there with all that other stuff in the way. So before you put all that stuff in the way, go ahead and put that guy in there. Go ahead and make sure that he's where he needs to be. All right, so now we're going to go to the hammer and the spring itself. So you want to put the hammer in but you do not want to put the pin in, because like we did when we took it apart, there is tension right here. With that pin in there, there's a lot of tension, especially once this is in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this in there, but we're going to slide it forward of the hole, and then we're going to put our spring in from the back. So that is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to put our hammer into the top here, moving it forward. Then we're going to take this right here and stick it onto the actual hammer itself. You may have to play with the hammer a little bit to make sure you get it. And remember, like I said a minute ago, let me re-illustrate this. It goes in like this, okay, right there. That's what you're looking for inside there, okay? So without the pin, stick this inside the cavity there, put this up against it, and now you can kind of get this started here. So we're gonna go from the top here to make this easier to see. So we got the spot there. Okay, so what you can see now is there are teeth on this frame back here to kind of set the tension for this guy. And when we took it apart, I don't know if you noticed or not, but it was in this last one here at the end. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna line this up to where this goes into, gotta make sure it's back on the trigger, on the hammer. All right, there we go. All right, so we wanna get those two lined up to where they go inside there like that. Okay, so we're gonna get it started to where it's inside the teeth like that, and then we're gonna give it a little bit of a love tap. Be very careful with this, don't hit it hard, because I don't know if you saw that or not, but that just hit flush. If you hit it too hard, once that tension lets go, because there is no pin, it'll just shoot right out the other side, and you're gonna have to go back and do it again. All right, so again, we have no tension on this spring here, so you wanna hold this back, kind of make sure it stays in the same spot. But what we're looking for is the hammer's hole. We wanna line those two holes up. So what I can do then is, seeing that it's slightly off, line that guy up like such, get my punch in there to kind of give it a space holder, and it also gives me something to pry against, because you do have tension now on this back side. We don't want to lose that tension either. So we're going to put that in there and kind of keep that guide there. Put your pin in. I don't know if I can get it in there. Come on. Get that started. Work that in. See what we need here. Get a little tension on there. That's fine. You expect it to have a little bit of tension while you're pulling it through, because you've got all this pressure on the spring back here, right? So let's get that. There we go. And then we're going to finish it up with the punch. All right, so now that we got that pin in there, we got everything squared away. We didn't lose this backside. Now it is under tension. I'm gonna get that over towards the middle where it's supposed to be, like such. Stop messing with my light here, keep flickering it. All right, so right now we have a lot of tension on this hammer. The reason is because if you can see here, there's a gap right there. You see this gap over here? That gap is not supposed to be there. This hammer is supposed to be nice and even in the middle. So we're going to take our little condenser here of a flathead screwdriver, and we're going to move both this rod and the hammer back towards the middle. All right. Once we got it in the middle, you'll notice almost immediately that you can move your hammer. Now it's still under a great bit of tension, right? And without the rest of the gun here, it's a lot harder than it normally would be. All right. So there is that. And that's interesting that that's holding back, given that we don't have a trigger. All right, so we got that in there. So now that we got that, again, it's easier to do it with the hammer in, spring, get it set, and then push it back, because then I can use my punch and lever that spring back while putting it back in there. And did I scratch that? All that work. All right. So now what we can do is we can focus on our trigger itself. Because we've already got the spring in here, again, this goes in on top like this. So this flat piece that's on here, this flat piece is what you're pushing up against the spring. So I find that it's easier to go ahead and get this spring, or excuse me, this pin started like such. Go ahead and get it started. Then pushing down on the spring, get your trigger in. So it's kind of a roll action, if you will. So get that in there. Now, again, I like to do kind of a guide situation. So if we can push it from this side and then push down, See if I can get that to where you can see it. I'll move forward there. There we go. All right, so push in and get that started. Boom. All right, so I've got the punch on that side holding it in place, so I've got a better idea of where it's gonna go. And then we're going to, I'm right-handed, so we're gonna do this. Give it a little bit of pressure. So let's go up here and, all right, now we're gonna finish this off with our punch. Get it started. Now with this firing pin, or excuse me, the trigger pin, it is almost flush with the outside of each side of the frames here. So just keep an eye on that and get it flush. Okay, so now that we got that in place, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put our locking bolt spring in place. All right, so as I mentioned before, it goes like this in the side, right? So we're gonna go up underneath. This underneath here. Screw goes down. All right, we're gonna press that down, try to line that hole up, see if we can't get it lined up. Ah, there we go. All right, so once we got that in there, we're gonna go ahead and send it home. Now you ain't gotta get crazy with it. Once it's in there, it's in there. Just get it tight. You ain't gotta crank it down. All right, so that works like that. All right, now that we got that set, now all we got left to do is the trigger guard itself. So as I mentioned before, you have a lip right here and then a screw on this side. So you're going to put it into your frame and then put it down. And then it's gonna line up beautifully with that screw hole in the back. So get it started. And then send it home. All right, very nice. All right, so let's go ahead and let's put the buttstock back on this guy, which is a fairly straight process. Like I said before, it's only got 3 screws, right? So you got the screw for the butt pad, and then you got the main screw in here. So we're gonna slide this over. So you wanna make sure that it's not protruding from either side, so that way when you go put your buttstock in, it's nice, smooth, and straight. A little bit of a alignment here. There we go. Beautiful. Just like so. All right, so you're gonna put your screw in the back. All right, as mentioned, don't go crazy with tightening it down like nuts because that is putting more tension between there. So let's go ahead and put our pad on, making sure that our nice owl, the Iver Johnson owl, is in the correct orientation. Screw 1, screw 2, send those home. Just like such. All right, so our receiver, our frame, all the buttstock is back together. All right, so on your forearm, your forearm is pretty straightforward. So you have this, I'm not even sure what was a forearm iron or whatever you want to call this side here. Basically, that is just 2 Phillips head screws. Take that off, and then you have your wood underneath. So in true fashion, let's go ahead and knock that out real quick. One and 2. Got to remember to stay on camera there, DJ. All right, so 1 and 2. All right, so as I can see, that's just your wood there. And then you have your metal piece that actually locks into there. Also Phillips head screws. So go ahead and pop that loose. 1 and 2. Now you can tell by the size which one goes where. Those shorter ones are for going down into this, and the longer ones are on your end here. But you can take this off here. That is all wood left here, and then there is a small pin here and a spring on the inside of this. Again, I'm not going to be messing with it because it works just fine. So putting that back in is exact opposite. Small screws again, not the long ones. You'll crack your forearm if you do. Back in. back in. All right, and then this guy gets lined up here. 1 and 2. Send them home. All right, so now we got the forearm and we got the buttstock and the frame back together. The only thing that we have left to do is going to be the barrel itself. All right, so now what we got here is we have our extractor. We have our extractor lever, which is under here, right? And then you have your extractor pin, your ejector lever check pin. The check pin goes through both sides here. You can see it, one on both sides, it goes through. And then you have your lever pin back here. Now there is a small spring pushing up on the lever this way, but then there's also a plunger and a extractor spring under here. So the first thing that you want to do is, if you're looking at here, you can see how the extractor kind of goes at a downward slope right here. Grab you a small screwdriver, stick it down in there, and pop that loose. All right, so now the lever is released the ejector here, the extractor rather, okay? So now we got that out of the way. Now what we can do is go ahead and let's send our ejector spring out with the pin. All right, see that come loose? All right, took tension off of that, and now we're loose here. So this, our pin came out of the bottom there, and there is our extractor there, or ejector rather. Gotta quit calling it that. All right, so there's your ejector. All right, so basically with here we have a check lever and our lever. All right, so what I'm gonna do, because there is a little bit of a gap here, I'm gonna go ahead and knock out the lever pin. And the reason I'm doing that is because the other pin will stay in place while also letting the tension off. You saw how that kind of moved forward? That took the tension off this back spring while I was doing that. So now this is in here. I've got the tension off the back spring. I've got our pin there. And now I can go ahead and I can send the check pin through. All right, so we got our check pin through, and now our lever can just come out like such. All right, so our lever is there. Go ahead and knock that spring. It wants to stay in there, so we'll go ahead and pull it out. So pull out our spring there. That is a lever spring. And then you have the plunger and extractor spring, ejector spring, down here in the bottom. So if you have a problem with that, you can pull that out. There is your spring and your plunger. So let's go ahead, let's put this bad boy back together. So as you saw, we're gonna take the springs, put them back in, put the plunger in, push that down in there. Go ahead and put our, well, we can leave this spring out for now, just so that way we don't flip it up and lose it now that we got this all apart. So let's go ahead and grab our ejector, put it in there, and then you can see there are 2 grooves in this. The first one is for your lever, the second one is for your pin. You can tell because it's got that niche, it locks in here like such. So that is for your lever, right? This is for your pin. So when you push this in there, you want to make sure first off that your rounded edge matches the barrel. All right, don't put it in upside down like this. You want to match the barrel. All right, so make sure it's in line with the barrel, and then get your pin started. And just like before, guys, while I'm doing this, this is the pin for your ejector. It's too big or too small for this hole, too big for that one. So if you're not sure, just grab the pins and you'll realize real quick which one is which. So let's flip this guy over actually, because it's a little bit tapered on the back side. So flip it over, push that in, and then it should, you should see it seat. So I'm gonna push that in, get that started, finish it up. And that is our ejector there. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and put our spring back into here. There's a little groove, you can see it. Put that in the groove. And then you have your lever. The lever goes in like this, all right? So a little notch down here, down, and then these two holes going towards the front of the barrel. All right, the spring sits on this little ledge right here, okay? So spring on ledge, just like we did before. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start with, where'd it go? I'm gonna start with my check pin because it's a little bit easier. It's right there in front. I'm gonna go ahead and stick that in there. Giving a little bit of pressure on the back side. Line that up and get it going. All right, this is a check pin, so this is not far enough. You want them to match on either side. So let's keep going. And that's about right there. All right, so now we're a little bit closer. We can get a little pressure there and put your lever pin in place. And you saw how much easier that lever pin was because we already got this in line. It's already there. So now we have our lever pin, our check pin, and the ejector pin all set up. I am going to give that just a little bit more. There we go. A little left tap. I like that. Okay, so now we've got it completely back together. All right, guys, now that we're back off the bench, we have our buttstock and our frame, and then you have the barrel. I wanted to mention two things real quick before you guys go to put this in there. First off, I failed to mention that when you have your extractor here, or ejector, you got your check lever, right? If this is all the way out, it won't go in. So you're gonna wanna push that in till you hear that actually click inside there, and you can see how it's going down. Now it's clicked inside there, and this is gonna stay where it's at. The other thing that you really gotta make sure is that the pins on this guy, the only ones that should be protruding outside this frame is your check pin. If your ejector or your lever pin aren't flush with the frame, you will have problems locking it down. So make sure that the only one that's protruding is this pin here. All right, and make sure that this is locked in the checked position. So now, like with any other, well, if I get my hands right, with any other single barrel, you have this groove here that sits on this guy inside here. So it is in, down, and together. All right, so in, down, press together. All right, so then what we have left is the forearm. So you grab your forearm, set that on top of your frame, line that up, and then push. All right, it shouldn't take more than that. It should just be squeeze your hand together, and that is it. And now we have a fully functioning Iver Johnson 12 gauge. All right, guys, if you guys have stuck with us this far, I cannot say thank you enough. I truly appreciate you guys hanging in there with us. It's been a little while since I've done a complete breakdown, but I felt like I needed to do one on this particular shotgun. To my cousin, thank you very much for allowing me and trusting me with the restoration of Great Grandpa's gun. It really means a lot. So, guys, if you haven't done yet, please hit that like button on the video. While you're down there, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It really does help us grow, helps us continue doing what we're doing. And guys, as always, as I've mentioned in every video that I've done, comment down below, let us know what you think. We always up to suggestions. Guys, your comments drive this channel. So, for Suburban Hunt 365, I'm DJ. Catch you guys on the next one.